What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third album by hip-hop duo Insane Clown Posse. Basically, this project is called Riddle Box, and it came out in the fall of 1995. The thing about this particular project is this is a pretty heralded project here. I would definitely have to say between this one, The Great Malenko, and then the Amazing Jekyll Brothers from 1999. Some of these type pitches, ICP had like a string of hit albums as far as that pitch gun went. And they quickly established like their Juggalo fold and pitches like that with like the Dark Carnival mythology and pitches like that. I'd have to say this one, the initial type ones. Thing about this particular album is the fact that this was around back when Tupac, Biggie, not quite Eazy-E, but ICP were putting out albums back when Eazy-E was still alive, some pitches like that. So it's definitely they go a ways back, and this is kind of an interesting format because definitely for 1995, this is pretty ahead of the times, I'd have to say. Just like how I felt about the Great Malenko back when I reviewed that back in like the spring or summer of 2015, I would definitely have to say that the sort of stuff around these particular times is just pretty. I mean, the thing about Juggalo type fold, there were Juggalos back in like the early mid 90s as far as those pitches kind of happened. They blew up moreover. Like, I want to say the bigger deal of an album was like The Great Malenko from 97. That was a pretty commercial type one, at least within the aspect of alternative and just underground rap, I'd have to say. But this particular album is this one just has some underground type appeal. This is definitely a pretty gritty type one to kind of get here. This is definitely when they were hungry, just within the aspects of just kind of some of their initial type projects. Now, there were some ones, I want to say, obviously, with this being their third album, there were two ones before this that were kind of, one of which I want to say came out in 1993, and the other one might have been either 92 or 91. So it's a good enough pitch to see some of the initial kind of Juggalo type projects. Even though Jackal Goldkick is not as fond of ICP, he had told me in the past that he had said that ICP might have taken inspiration from like Esham and pitches like that, who had been around since like the 80s with doing horrorcore as far as those pitches kind of happen. That's the initial kind of concept. Is they did a lot for Michigan rap and horrorcore as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens. It's definitely pretty. This has to be like a horrorcore classic, especially out of the 90s as far as that fair kind of happens with it. It's a big deal as far as that pitch kind of goes. Once again, this is around in Tupac, Biggie's lifetime as far as that particularly kind of happened. This album went gold as far as that went, so it sold 500,000 copies. Probably by these days, I would probably have to say it probably might be platinum as far as that pitch can go. It's just, for the most part, for a Juggalo album to go gold or platinum is kind of a big deal. Not to say like they don't sell, but they've just always been more alternative and underground as far as that pitch can goes. But this is definitely one of the staples of like Juggalo music, just like Amazing Jekyll Brothers and Great Malenko and some of those type ones. But definitely wanted to cover like a seminal kind of Juggalo album as far as that pitch happens with it. Not a full-blown Juggalo creator, but I do review them often enough that I want to get more delved into like their content and just overall know more about their lore and pitches like that, and just the overall aspects about it. Definitely not to say I wouldn't be a Juggalo creator, but just not the full-blown like that would be like the number one brand name, and say that would be the number one brand name I would go by. But it's definitely something I do have affinity for, so I look after it kind of within the concept about it. There were some singles off this particular album. I would have to say I look after it. At least two of them. One was Chicken Hunting, which is a pretty good concept. This is like a remix of an earlier song, I'd have to say, which is that I definitely like the concept of this one. And then another one was The Joker's Wild. At least that's what Wikipedia says about the discography of ICP. They attempted two singles. Now back in those days, underground type music was a lot different. Before folks like Tech Nine and some of those type folks were really folks moreover like Brother Lynch Hung and some of those type folks like Esham, some of those type folks in particular that were 90s kind of horrorcore type folks. They kind of, when they had like a low key type label, it's just kind of the concept that if there were singles at all, it was kind of a big deal just within the concept about it. That's just the after. That's kind of the ability behind it, just being able to say that. But it is a pretty good concept. They did have some promotion and got things started. The Juggalo fold was, I do believe that there were Juggalos as far back as, I mean, the initial kind of OG Juggalos or triple OG Juggalos that would have been like, 1992, 93, 95 and stuff was pretty much around this particular time. So it's just a hit album here. This is kind of like a cult classic of an album, I would definitely have to say. It's not going to get like a full-blown classic score, but it's definitely going to get pretty close for me because I do see the overall sheer and blistering quality of this. But yeah, the two singles on here, just being able to say and stuff, like the first single was Chicken Hunting, which I'll go ahead and talk about the songs I recommend on here, and then we'll get to the singles. So there's 16 songs in this particular album, Riddle Box, and minus like the two skits, which would be the intro and then the interview skit. There's 14 songs in here. Now of those 14, I wound up recommending 11. So that's a pretty good concept just to get that in particular. It's definitely going to have a pretty heralded score, just damn near close, just right on the cusp of getting like a 10 out of 10, I'd have to say. It's up there with Great Malenko. I'd definitely have to say it's one of their best albums. I haven't listened to a super ton of ICP albums, but I definitely like this one pretty sheer. You can easily see the quality behind it. Chicken Hunting, the Slaughterhouse Mix was the first single. This reminds me of like a haunted kind of Beastie Boys and Kid Rock type tone, I would have to say in particular. It's like a ghoulish kind of vintage horrorcore song, I would have to say, and this is like a rap rock kind of gem. So this one definitely has some haunting type appeal. Definitely appreciate the aspect behind this one. If you do like rap rocks and pitches like that, it's an early new metal type op to kind of get. It's a pretty interesting concept that ICP was kind of doing this just with the more gothic type tone, horrorcore type tone, just within a rap rock type fare in 1995. This is a pretty heralded type concept. It's a pretty hit remix here. I haven't heard the original Chicken Hunting, but I would have to say, haven't heard the original Chicken Hunting, but I would have to say it's a good concept to see this remix on here. It's pretty heralded type one. Definitely feels like a Juggalo highlight out of the mid 90s, I'd have to say. The second single would be The Joker's Wild. This is another. The second single is The Joker's Wild. This is another nice one. This reminds me more of like the Great Milenko days that would be on their next album. It's a pretty good pitch. It's like a warped kind of doomsday throwback of a song, I'd have to say, in like a horrorcore type bop sense, I would have to suppose. This is pretty ahead of the times for 1995. I would definitely feel like this is like a more retro kind of version of like the Great Milenko, like I was saying. More skeletal type version. It's very looming and very looming and just doomsday-esque, I'd have to say, but I do appreciate the production fairness overall. The gothicness of this particular song is a pretty good highlight. Once again, this just feels pretty heralded. This is sort of stuff that it would have been a great concept to have gotten some of the folks like DMX and Tupac, some of those type folks on these particular type songs, just because they just feel so different, like vanilla rap music, the sort of shit that was going on around this particular time with ICP and this sort of stuff. It's pretty ahead of the pack. I would say it's just a great concept to kind of see some of this type of stuff because there weren't a ton of folks. I mean, even Twisted was kind of with the House of Crazies around this particular time. That's the sort of stuff that they were doing. But apart from like House of Crazies and ICP and some of those type folks, the initial kind of stuff, the initial kind of formation of Psychopathic Records, a lot of this was pretty much the horrorcore that was kind of going on around this time, with a little bit of folks like Brother Lynch Hung and some folks like that, Isham, obviously some of those type folks just getting some of those 90s type ones that kind of did it. A lot of this just feels a lot different from like the stuff that when you think of 1995, obviously, Tupac had not put out All Eyes on Me, which was a hit and quality, G-Funk and kind of West Coast album. Biggie hadn't put out Life After Death. Dr. Dre hadn't put out The Chronic 2001. So things were kind of still stark. I like the production fare on this particular album. It's just kind of the concept that, you think like G-Funk had kind of happened and the production fares were improving. East Coast was kind of improving some of those type things. But it's just the particular type fare that this really doesn't feel like a boom bap record. This really doesn't feel like a boom bap or kind of staccato type record. It just kind of has a lot more just stark and skeletal typeness. I mean, it's not quite as developed. I do feel like the Great Milenko is even more haunting than this particular one, but this is a pretty fresh album just to be able to say what the appeal of this particular album has. It just has a lot of good ghastliness about it, and this really has like really has the compatibility, especially in the singles. They sound really compelling and appealing, I'd have to say. So it's a good concept, but it's definitely a pretty spiffy album in terms of the fresh productions that it has, I'd have to say. So I'm gonna go ahead and recommend the 11 songs out of 14 I recommend on here. So it would be Chicken Hunting, The Joker's Wild, Headless Boogie, The Killing Fields, Little Something Something, Cemetery Girl, Riddle Box, 12, I'm Coming Home, The Show Must Go On, and Toy Box. Basically, the only 3 songs I don't recommend on here would just be 3 Rings, Dead Body Man, and Old Evil Eye. Talk about those. Like, basically, Dead Body Man was just kind of an outing type song, just kind of an out and about type one. Dead Body Man was just kind of an outing type one to get errands done as far as that pitch would kind of happen, but just didn't pull out the vibes nearly as well as I would have wanted it to. It was just, I need probably something a little bit more haunting that could have been like Chicken Hunting, some of those type pitches. Just another rap rock, probably just a better rap rock variation of Chicken Hunting, something like that. Dead Body Man had a little bit of rap rock on there, but just didn't pull it off nearly as well. Old Evil Eye was just kind of a jeery type one. This was a real kind of leeriness overall. Old Evil Eye was just kind of a leery type one that had some of that haunting aspect about it, but it just kind of felt like an odd pairing of type one. It was kind of a haunting type one, but didn't really have like the translation as far as like a better aspect of type one. I mean, there's a lot of skits on here just in the aspect. I feel like some of these album cuts that it has the haunting aspect down, but it just didn't deliver as much as far as like as full blown. I feel like the composition and overall execution of All Evil I just didn't work nearly as well. I mean, I like somewhat of the production for that was kind of like I was saying, like a kind of haunted, kind of ghastly, kind of leery type one, but it just didn't pull out the vibe nearly as well. 3 Rings just had a lot of ghastliness kind of going on with that one. It was just a particular one that just was pretty spooky type one, like some of these ones on here, like Headless Boogie, Joker's Wild, some of those type ones, but just the composition of that one was not quite as eloquent and nearly composed as well as like some of these other type ones. It's just kind of a messier type one. That just happens to be a thing. So a nice one on here that's not really as much of a full-blown song, but I still like the appeal. This one is Riddle Box, the title track. This is definitely like a dark carnival kind of loony kickoff music, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a good initial kind of dap and get station type music, I'd have to say. Get some things planned, just figure out what you're going to do, call up your buddies, some pitches like that. Get some stuff started as far as that particular kind of happens. This is like a good roll up some green, roll up some weed type tune to kind of have. Like some of these, obviously, you've got your smoking songs on here and pitches like that, but this is more just roll up some blunts, roll up some zigzags, get some things prepared as far as that pitch kind of goes along with it. Just a good concept, just real kind of carnival type and like a shrouded type sense to kind of get here. Definitely a pretty good concept. Cemetery Girl's a pretty nice one. This is the most popular song according to Spotify, which is an interesting pitch, I'd have to say. It's like a brooding, kind of excellent autumn gloom of a song, I'd have to say. It's like an offhanded kind of lady song, I would have to suppose. Pretty good concept for that. This is like a great song. This is like a great song for gothicas, and just by that I mean gothic chicas as far as that pitch kind of goes along with that. And this is just like a shrill outing. Just one for kind of being out and about. Maybe visiting graveyards, pitches like that, just kind of out and about, just in the autumn, just kind of out and about in like the autumn wind as far as that particular pitch kind of goes along with it. Just some good stuff, just some good stuff to kind of get there. I do appreciate the concept of some of these type ones. Just good gloomy type gothic ladies type tune to kind of get really. It is Cemetery Girl's a good gloomy type gothic ladies tune to kind of get, so that's a pretty nice one. Just appreciate the concept. And then Little Something Something's another lady song that works pretty well. This is a little bit more of like a Jiri type one, but I appreciate the concept behind it. This is like a Jiri but kind of jovial ladies haze of a song, I'd have to say. It's like a great smoke if you with chicas type song. So definitely if you got some ladies to smoke with, it's a good concept. Kind of have this in particular. Just real nice one for that relative laid back typeness. It's a warp type one. Just reminds me of like Nirvana's Lithium. Just a real dazing type one, like a kind of just a real lazy type one and like a jeering type sense, I'd have to say. But this is like a slap happy kind of angry clown vibes that this song particularly kind of gets. So it's very slapstick just within the appeal behind it. That typical kind of frenetic type, that typical kind of slapstick humor that ICP has in like some of their 90s albums, I'd have to say, just within the concept of just being shrouded in pitches like that. But just kind of this feels like a 60s kind of show, some 50s kind of black and white television type show, just within like a haunted type angry clown type sense. I'd have to say it's a pretty good concept. But I just like the appeal, like Little Something Something. It's a real kind of off the wall type lady song that works pretty well. Definitely one of the more emphatic type songs to get off this particular album, just in terms of the head trip type appeal, is 12. This is a real nice one. This is like one of the album's more murky and shrouded cuts, I'd have to say in particular. It's a definite kind of head trip, I would have to say about this one. It's like a great warped song. It's like a great warped kind of tore up hangout type song, I'd have to say in particular. And this is a good one to zone out to. This is a lengthier song, but it just works pretty well. This is a great song to just smoke like hella swishers, pitches like that, just kind of get some crunkness going on as far as that pitch kind of goes. Real nice one. Another one that's good for that same type. Another one that's good for that same type fare is The Killing Fields, I'd have to say. Is like a glaring and kind of moody funhouse distortion of a song, I'd have to say. It's like some great hangout smoke, which I would definitely feel like. And this is just a wooziness of a song, I have to say in particular. And this is just good for some night thrills. Pretty excellent concept, kind of get this. Just really appreciate the distortion of some of these. I feel like this is like a more stark version of like the Great Malenko. I feel like the Great Malenko is just a lot more of like a looming kind of gothic, this kind of real syndrome of a project to kind of get. But this one in particular is a little bit more just of like a claustral type one. I feel like there's just like the productions are a little, I mean, obviously with it being 2 years prior, you would think that that's the concept. They're just a little bit more skeletal, but it's not horribly noticeable that the productions are different that much from the Great Malenko. I mean, they are both these albums, Riddle Box and the Great Malenko, are a great 1-2 punch to kind of get. It's this kind of the concept that for 1995, once again, it's just the fact for 1995, this probably would have been a 10 out of 10 album had I listened to this back in 95, 98, some pitches like that. I'd say this would have been one of the more emphatic albums out. I feel like this is pretty much the impact of this particular album is about as good as like a 90s staple. It's just surprising that rap websites, like when you think of folks like Rolling Stone and some of those type places, are all music, they give this particular album like a 2-star out of 5 or like a 2-star out of 4 stars, some pitches like that, because the appeal behind it, just because it didn't have like a commercial single that hit #1, and this is not like a multi-platinum kind of album. I feel like they have a lot of humor on this particular project. They were trying to do the jokes like The Chronic was, and some of those type albums like Easy Does It from 1988, some of those type pitches and just overall things like that. So it does have this like the impact of just like 90s pop culture as far as that kind of goes along with it. Just a good concept. It's very impactful, underappreciated 90s gem. This is definitely one of the staples. Like when you think of like an album like The Chronic, obviously, or Ready to Die, in terms of like an underground and alternative rap type fold, this is one of the central type ones, I would have to say, just being able to tell by the impact of this. Pretty good concept. But a real nice one on here would be I'm Coming Home. This is kind of one that's a different pitch from like the rest of the album, I'd have to say, but still a nice one. It's like a surprisingly balmy and kind of green foray, I'd have to say, of a song by Green. It just made more kind of lush and just kind of just like summer like and just spring like, just a little bit more balmy and pitches like that. It's like a distorted kind of half stone makeshift of a song, I'd have to say in particular. And it's just like some workaday kind of errands type cut to kind of get here, just going out and about, just neighborhood type romp, getting some supplies and pitches like that, getting ready to get crunk, get some bills paid, some pitches like that, get those last tasks wrapped up as far as that pitch kind of goes along with it. Well, the lone song on here that kind of has something that's not like a haunting kind of aspect. I mean, most of this album is pretty autumn like music, this gothic Marilyn Manson, Korn type stuff. Some of those type folks in particular, just the aspect of like some horrorcore. But this is the least one. It is somewhat dreary. I'd have to say I'm coming home, but it's just kind of the aspect. It at least has like some sunlight in the particular song enough to be able to say, yeah, you got to get some bills paid and get those, keep the electric on, some pitches like that. I'd have to say it's just a good concept. So another nice one on here would be The Show Must Go On. It's like an initial kind of haunted, dapper song. I'd have to say in particular, it's definitely like some good PlayStation type music and smoke a few. I'd have to say definitely in particular, and this is like a local kind of get station type song. So this is B1, kind of something to listen to after class or work, some pitches like that. Call up the homies, get some things started as far as that would kind of happen, just full blown as far as that pitch kind of goes. Just some initial kind of kickoff, just localized kind of house party type hangout as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just when Tekken's on or something like that, Resident Evil's on, some of those type pitches. I'd say it's a good concept for that. Toy Box is a pretty nice one. It's like a prankster's kind of evening frenetic fun. I'd have to say a pretty good concept for that. It's like this reminds me of like a haunted kind of Cypress Hill Insane. The song reminds me of like a haunted kind of Cypress Hill type song, or like this reminds me of like a haunted kind of Cypress Hill Insane in the Brain type song. I'd have to say in particular. And this is a pretty claustral type song, so it definitely has that aspect of just ripped out of 1993, just a more cheery type aspect about that as far as that would kind of go. If you do like Insane in the Brain by Cypress Hill, it's a good concept kind of see ICP's kind of warped. It's a good concept kind of see ICP's kind of warped point of view on that particular song. And I'd say just a real prankster type song to get for like some evening haze. And then Headless Boogie is a pretty nice one. It's a good concept here. It's like a gloomy but kind of rowdy house party and local noise of a song. I'd have to say in particular, it's definitely like a smoke a few type tune. I'd have to say, and this just reminds me of Twisted. The song reminds me of Twisted's We Don't Die and like the chorus. And obviously this song came out 5 years before Twisted's Freak Show album with We Don't Die on there. But in terms like the kind of frenetic kind of gothic chorus of We Don't Die off that particular album from Freak Show, I'd have to say that Headless Boogie is a pretty good rendition of that same kind of Juggalo turn up in like a rowdy sense and just kind of house party kind of unionizing, I'd have to say in particular. So it's a good concept. So that's the basic pitch about this particular album. So there's tons of hits on here, I'd have to say. So me recommending 11 songs out of 14 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 9.25 out of 10. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 9.25 out of 10. I feel like the impact is definitely there. It just has plenty of quality type songs. This is a very haunting and gothic type album that has a ton of pitches. Just that overall appeal, like autumn type music, Halloween type fare, just great between late August to about late November. I'd say in particular, there's plenty of good tones just to kind of have for like some smoke edge, some hangout type fare, some gothic Juggalo chicas as far as that pitch kind of happens, some pitches like that. I'd have to say. Just some good overall appeal, some smoking type songs in this overall hangout type fare, just within a relative sense. Even some Bill Payne songs like I'm Coming Home, some of those type ones I'd have to say. Just a good enough concept to just appreciate some cooler weather, just appreciate the times. Definitely a Juggalo staple and a 90s staple and like an alternative type highlight and like an alternative type fare for like underground rap and pitches like that. The social score, I'm going to go ahead and give a 10 out of 10. I would almost give it like a 9.5 or something like that, just in terms because the singles didn't chart as full blown. I'd have to say it's just more of an underground type album, but I definitely feel like as large as like the Juggalo culture is, this is one of the staples, and this is one of the initial foundations of that particular subgenre, Juggalo music, underground music, and horrorcore type music in particular. Just the triple threat of some of that type of stuff just did a lot of damage. As the quality songs on here, this is an excellent. Has the quality songs on here. This is an excellently produced project, definitely out of 1995. There's not too many albums that are full-blown produced as well as this particular one. Barely feels like it came out of 1995. It was just something that was kind of ahead of the times and pitches like that. Just plenty of good night type fare for night traverse, graveyard strolls, gas station romps, pitches like that, smoking with juggalettes, some of those type fares, just to be able to say in particular, just smoke edge and just overall fares like that, I'd have to say. So it's just the thrill of a time, up there with the Great Malenko and pitches like that as far as some of those type of albums. Definitely like an alternative and underground rap staple. So that's kind of the thing about it. In terms of the future, like ICP had put out an album in 2021 called Yum Yum Bedlam or something like that, and they've dropped like a number of EPs that I've seen, pitches like that. I'd have to say that they do have like the Gathering of Juggalos coming up in like July, some pitches like that. So there's some stuff going on. There's going to be some folks coming out, like Ouija Mac has been dropping stuff. They have some new folks in town, kind of like Darby O'Trill and Ouija Mac and Frankie Goldie and some of those type folks. I'd have to say in particular, plenty of those folks to kind of get the Juggalo type subgenre. It's just overall vast, hundreds if not thousands of artists damn near, I'd have to say. So it's a good enough concept. We're definitely going to have to get to some more ICP. I want to review like their 2007 album, The Tempest, and some other pitches like that. So we're going to get to some more ICP soon enough. I'd have to say it's just an excellent kind of full blown album here, and definitely a revolutionary type one. That's pretty much virtually a classic, just right on the cusp of being like a full blown 10 out of 10 classic, I'd have to say.